Hola, ¿qué tal? Este es un nuevo programa de resumen latinoamericano que, como todas las semanas, estamos emitiendo desde Argentina para todo el mundo. Y hoy, como les habíamos anticipado, vamos a dar la segunda parte de Los Espías de Castro, un documental de Aslin y de Gary Lennon, dos documentalistas irlandeses, que habla de los 5 héroes cubanos, esos protagonistas de una verdadera gesta para salvar al pueblo de Cuba del terrorismo de la gusanera, que tanto desde Miami como de distintos puntos de Estados Unidos siempre han alimentado la idea de desestabilizar a Cuba y hacerle el mayor mal posible, además del bloqueo. Nos estamos refiriendo a los héroes cubanos que estuvieron presos, que fueron condenados a cadena perpetua y hasta 2 o 3 cadenas perpetuas, pero que la lucha del pueblo cubano, de su conducción revolucionaria y con Fidel a la cabeza, logró rescatar y que volvieran a Cuba en un mar de multitudes que los homenajeó y los sigue homenajeando hasta el día de hoy. Vamos a la segunda parte de Los Espías de Castro.
The news from ITN.
The red flag came down over the Kremlin tonight as President Gorbachev resigned and brought to an end 7 decades of communist rule in the Soviet Union.
The Soviet Union had disappeared. Cuba went into a very severe economic crisis. What we call the special period began.
100% of the oil that was coming from the Soviet Union stopped, so we have zero energy. The situation was terrible.
The embargo places incredible economic limitations on the Cuban population. It's as harmful as any war. It kills innocent civilians.
Buena parte del periodo especial la pasé sola con mi hija. Y entonces, bueno, parece que es que yo estaba tan flaca y yo había pasado tanto trabajo. A mí se me había caído hasta la casa, hasta la escalera de la casa. Había ido a parar a una albergue.
People were desperate to get out of there, so there was an uptick in the number of people taking rafts and small boats to get out of Cuba.
Rafters have, since 1991, depended on being spotted by brothers to the rescue.
We had to admit that thousands of people were found. They would fill the plane with journalists from abroad, and they would go and look for rafters.
So that people throughout the world could see what was happening with Cuba, what its pain and suffering in the island, the lack of liberty, the lack of opportunity.
They would take advantage of the flux of rafters to launch a propaganda campaign against Cuba.
Private donations keep the brothers flying. Even airplanes have been donated. It's a passion for founder Jose Basulto.
They're coming out not because the United States is here, but because Fidel Castro is there. And until that is so, they're going to continue coming out of the island.
His goals are not public. I knew because I was there, but the public doesn't know about that. It was a very intelligently devised operation. It was a psyop operation based on the knowledge he had acquired from the CIA. Basulto never stopped first thinking on terrorism. He was a terrorist by training.
To call me terrorist, it's hilarious. They try to portray me as something that I am not. Not that I wouldn't, under the circumstances, had taken arms in certain circumstances against them, because I saw it as the only way.
We had an agent infiltrated, brought to the rescue because we knew that they were doing way more of that.
Basulto consulted with me to land here in Cuba with explosive. I'm talking about 1992. When I went to see him, he had a map of the Cuban electric grid. He wanted to see with me whether he would be able to land the plane next to one of those grid towers to put an explosive and blow him up.
Ideas are ideas, but plans is a different story. Every time some of these guys do something to me, I wish I would be hitting him in the head with a bat. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to do it.
René's role was to infiltrate Brothers to the Rescue, then report back to Gerardo so that that information could be relayed to Cuba so that they could, be ready to deal with incursions by Brothers to the Rescue.
Fortunately, I didn't kill anybody. Not once. No, there's one person that can be claimed that he lost his life on account of what I did. Other people cannot say the same thing. By the way, who trained us to kill, who trained us to do all those things that nonviolence regrets when they happen, were the United States. We are the results of U.S. foreign policy.
Cuba would send an urgent communication. You could listen to the shortwave transmissions and receive the information from Cuba. Then after you have the information, you get it in the computer. You had a disk that has a special secret program, and that turned into a message. We received the instruction from Cuba. One of the missions that we were working in was called Marina Operation.
The mission was to surveil Orlando Bosch.
He had a long history of terrorism against Cuba.
Are you planning to try again to assassinate Fidel Castro?
Until the end, we will keep trying. We prefer to destroy Cuba than a communist Cuba.
As some authorities in the U.S. called him once, the worst terrorist in the Western Hemisphere. He kept planning terrorist attacks against Cuba all the time.
Nobody stopped him.
Cuba had information that he was planning to introduce some weapons in Cuba. We wanted to keep a close eye on him.
To be aware of what his movements were, who visited him, what he was involved in.
Basically, that included filming him.
We never used anything that was sophisticated, that was something like spyware. We used commercial stuff. Camera, regular camera, video camera that anybody has. He was meeting with individuals to organize actions against Cuba.
I had him very close. I remember being in a supermarket parking lot, and I remember thinking to myself, you could not imagine somebody that doesn't know who this guy is, could not imagine how criminal his mind is and how dangerous he is. It's out of conscience, out of heart, that you can do a job like this.
They were doing it not for the money. I mean, these were ideologues. They were doing it for what they thought were political and sort of reasons associated with their government.
As a matter of fact, out of ethics, Cuba had never paid an agent just to be an agent. The reason is simple, right? If you do something for money, you would do it for the people that give you the more money. If you are, a baseball player or a soccer player and play for money, you will play for the team that pays you the most. And on that logic, if you are a spy for money, then you will spy for the country that pays you the most. And Cuba cannot compete with anybody on money issues, right?
Gerardo and the others lived in simple apartments.
I was living in a very small apartment.
Very modest individuals, modest means.
I was eating the basic thing, like one hamburger with one Coca-Cola and 90 cents with 35 cents. That was my dinner.
Probably made more money from the American government working at Boca Chica than he did from the Cuban government as an agent.
You watch movies and agents have encounters in fancy restaurants or hotels or drive nice cars. were having problems all the time with all cars. Those were very difficult years.
René se va en el año 90 y empieza a pasar los años.
I knew that back then, at that time, in Cuba, there was turmoil in the family. My loved ones, my friends were all would be, thinking that I was a traitor, and it was really hard.
Y empecé a pensar y a pensar.
She didn't believe deep down that I was a traitor. She started to follow the traces that I left behind.
Este hombre fue al trabajo a buscar alguna información sobre mí. Que me dijo que él que conocía a René desde Angola y que se había enterado de la noticia y bueno, que venía a ver cómo estaba la niña.
Somehow she felt that he hadn't been with me in Angola. She started to look at this guy and follow that guy and call him to his job.
Tú no estuviste con René en Angola, tú estuviste en mi trabajo buscando información sobre mí y yo llegué a una conclusión de que René no es traidor y tú eres el compañero que lo atiende.
Well, the guy was in shock.
Ese hombre se insultó, me dijo una pila de cosas, no digas esas cosas, ya tú te estás volviendo loca, te vas a meter en un problema. Me llamó por teléfono y dice, necesito hablar contigo.
At the end, they had to call her and tell her, please, leave us alone. He's with us.
Volví a respirar y dije, bueno, es el René que siempre conocí.
I knew that at some point she would join me in the U.S. if I had to stay.
We determined early on that there were a group of Cuban spies operating here in South Florida. But you have to understand, initially, the FBI treated this as sort of a separate intelligence operation. They were conducting sneak and peek warrants, basically going in, looking, copying, obtaining information, putting it all back, just like in the movies, and then analyzing, exploiting, and continuing their investigation. Intelligence had been gathered, people had been identified, but really initially, there was no contemplation of a prosecution.
4 News Now continues.
It is the start of Cuban rafter season, and today more were spotted.
In 1994, it was a period of very economic crisis. Fidel said, well, whoever wants to go in a raft, he can go. And thousands of people left.
During the 1994 rafter crisis, Brothers to the Rescue played a critical role, directing the Coast Guard to thousands of Cubans fleeing the island nation.
The rafters crisis forced the U.S. government to sign an agreement with Cuba.
What became known as wet foot, dry foot policy meant if you made it onto land in the United States, you were given permanent resident status immediately. If you were picked up at the sea, you were sent back to Cuba.
Now, this change in policy creates big problems for the Brothers to the Rescue. They spot the rafters, they call the Coast Guard.
Who is he going to save if the rafters are going to be sent back?
There was no reason for Brothers to Rescue to fly.
The public mission of Brothers to the Rescue comes to an end.
Then that policy changed. Their mission changed.
We put together the idea of a plan on how to structure a movement inside of Cuba using nonviolent means.
They began to poke the bear, as they say.
Well, Brothers to the Rescue plane flew right into Cuban airspace and over Havana.
This is an act of civil disobedience. We realize what we're doing, and all we're doing is signaling out to the people of Cuba that civil disobedience is possible.
Plane roared at rooftop level through downtown, banking towards Havana Harbor.
They threw leaflets trying to encourage the people to overthrow the government.
We had a slogan, compañeros no hermanos, which means comrades no, We're brothers. We flew by the Faro del Morro, this structure that has the lighthouse in Morro. It went next to it. That really upset the government too.
It was a provocation to the Cuban government.
The Cuban government responded saying any ship from abroad that forcibly invades our sovereign water will be sunk and any aircraft down.
You do enter the airspace or territorial waters or territory of another country, you are subject to the law enforcement agencies of that country.
We were willing to take the risks to bring about a change in the island by using nonviolence.
Remember, this is the same terrorist that fired cannon against a hotel in Cuba.
It never would have been tolerated by our government if Cuba sent a light plane over Washington, D.C., it would have been pulverized.
Unfortunately, Basulto decided to keep up that operations.
He overflew Havana many times.
Those leaflets we had dropped that went to Havana, we did that like at least 3 times. We dropped at one point like 500,000 of them.
Every time that Basulto violated Cuban airspace, the Cuban government would send a diplomatic note to the United States with the data about the overflight.
The Cuban government repeatedly asked the U.S. government to stop the flights from the Brothers to the Rescue. The American government did nothing.
And he did it again and again until in 1996, the Cuban government decided to put an end to that.
We decided, well, let's send 3 airplanes to fly the mission of seeing if we find any rafters.
2 p.m. Saturday, 3 small Cessna Skymaster aircraft took off from Opa-locka Airport near Miami.
The flight plans were provided to Cuba by the U.S. authorities, the FAA. So everybody knew that Basulto was flying to Cuba.
I called Havana Center, told them that we were coming in our mission and so on.
Instead of moving in this direction, east-west direction, allegedly to watch for rafters, I don't know for what purpose, he went straight towards Havana.
At 2:57, one of the pilots from the group Brothers to the Rescue tells the control tower in Havana of their intention to fly into airspace south of the 24th parallel. The pilot is warned of possible danger.
They threaten us like they always did.
You are in Cuban airspace, that's a forbidden zone.
We kept on going.
At 3:09, 2 Cuban military jets are airborne.
Well, all hell broke loose very quickly. I saw a MiG zoom in front of us from left to right. I was in conversation with the other 2 planes, and I lost contact with one of them, and I could see in the distance smoke. I said, oh shit. I was calling the other one.
Mike, are you with us? Can you see that smoke to my left? I don't see anything now. I did see smoke. Mike.
The other one also lost contact with them. Again, saw smoke.
Cuban fighter jets shot 2 of Basulto's planes out of the sky, killing 4 people. Flying a 3rd plane, Basulto barely escaped.
This has been assassination in the high seas.
The problem with the shoot-down is not so much that the shoot-down occurred. I mean, on a human level, of course it is. It's where it occurred.
The U.S. authorities said that Basulto had violated Cuban airspace, but the other 2 planes, according to the U.S., were shot down very close to Cuban waters, but inside international waters, which would be a crime.
In plane, the incident occurred over Cuban territory.
One plane was definitely in Cuban airspace, and I think that the Cuban government and their pilots believed these aircraft were in Cuban airspace.
Saturday's attack was an appalling reminder of the nature of the Cuban regime.
The planes that were shot down were U.S. flagged planes, civilian planes, The people inside were Americans.
Personally, I don't think it's ever justified shooting down a civilian aircraft unless that aircraft is posing like an imminent danger. After so many air incursions and after so many incidents, the Cuban government just felt that they had to enforce their border, and they did this.
It's a duty. It's the most fundamental obligation for any government on earth to protect their population.
Who's to fault here? I say it has to be, a combination of the U.S. government for not stopping these flights and Basulto for undertaking these reckless acts where people got killed.
I think the president has an excellent opportunity to exercise leadership here with Castro and perhaps bring this to an end once and for all.
Basulto hoped that the U.S. would take action, military action against Cuba.
I am not ruling out any further steps in the future, should they be required.
One of the options that the U.S. administration considered was a military option, to retaliate. And if that was a possibility, maybe in Key West Station, the forces there will multiply. An invasion might be coming.
If you see something movement that is not the normal movement, so you report that.
Just to say, no, today the United States is not invading Cuba, is important for Cuba.
Our top story, that confrontation with Cuba over the downing of those two light planes this weekend. Planes carrying members of the Cuban exile group called Brothers to the Rescue.
In Miami today, a moment of silence for the 4 missing pilots from Brothers to the Rescue. They are the newest heroes in the exile community.
When the shoot down occurred, that's really when FBI walks into our office, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Miami, and says there is a potential criminal case of the most serious magnitude. We stepped in and said, hey, we've got to stop this.
They needed to have a scapegoat. Somebody had to answer for this.
Created an atmosphere in Miami. I needed to be on alert to see what the reaction would be by the U.S. government and the groups. I know that the reaction in Miami was going to be hate.
Good evening. President Clinton late today announced a series of moves against Cuba for the shooting down of 2 light planes, but he stopped well short of ordering any military action against Fidel Castro.
What did we do? We passed some silly laws.
I will move promptly to reach agreement with the Congress on the pending Helms-Burton Cuba legislation so that it will enhance the effectiveness of the embargo in a way that advances the cause of democracy in Cuba.
The Helms-Burton Act tightened the noose against the Cuban government, plunging the country into an even deeper economic crisis. The Cuban government turned to tourism for their economic salvation.
The tourist industry will be a very important way to bring some money, to buy oil in different countries, food, building new hotel. That was to bring more tourists to Cuba.
A series of bombings in Havana.
Havana's luxury hotels, a vital source of foreign currency, have been hit by a spate of bombings. The latest one claiming the life of an Italian tourist.
They were able to tie that explosive device to the exile community in Miami.
There were bombs that were placed in different areas throughout the whole island.
There were people that were killed, maimed, and injured in these explosions.
We were immediately tasked with finding out about the bombs, where the money was coming from.
35-year-old Jesus Hoyas is military commander of Alpha 66. He's led 3 raids on Cuba's beach resorts, targeting the $1.5 billion a year tourism industry that is now Cuba's economic lifeline.
What are you trying to do?
Trying to get tourism to stop going in Cuba, trying to spend money, going there economy-wise, trying to stop that so we can liberate Cuba.
This is aimed at the tourist business. Do you think that's important, that's good, that's a good target?
When a country like Cuba has been suffering so much for many years, I mean, I don't think the tourists should go there to cooperate to the Castro government.
People will say, no, I don't go to Cuba because it's not safe, you know?
Use all your ability to stop any kind of plot to set up a bomb. I'm talking about terrorists for real. It's not a game. They can kill your people. They can kill your wife to protect Cuba. That's our main mission.
Groups were coming in and setting off bombs in hotels and restaurants. You know, you can be damn sure that our country is going to be, you know, sending spies to figure out who's doing this, you know, who's funding it, who's behind this stuff.
Every single day of my life, I was reaffirmed in the need that Cuba had to have individuals doing what we were doing.
Everything that these agents were doing, the FBI knew about. There was a lot of the reports which were being transmitted back to Cuba, which were all being intercepted.
The investigation had been going on for years.
There was a lot of surveillance.
There were some signs. Somebody who saw something here, somebody who believed that his apartment was broke into there, spaced in time, maybe, so much as to not raising an alarm.
I was suspicious of the apartment in front of mine because there was a person that used to live there and suddenly he moved and the apartment continued to be empty, which is weird in that part of Miami Beach where I used to live. And something told me there might be surveillance there.
Breaker, breaker, all units subject to back in view at the bus stop, standing at it.
I was supposed to wait for my contact, and I was supposed to stay in this bus stop. But when I watch inside, I see the one window move like this, you know. I say, well, somebody's watching me from that place.
You detect some signs, but you couldn't tell for sure, and you couldn't abort a mission just for some minor signs.
I moved out of that position, so I moved to another position.
59 is solo, passing the CP, getting ready to enter the Wendy's location.
Okay, all units, subject is moving towards the Wendy's.
I went inside the bathroom of that place. We changed the materials, we changed the suitcases, we fled.
There was information sent back to Cuba by the Cuban spies regarding the activities of the anti-Castro organizations based in Florida.
Technically speaking, it was a mission that should have been performed by the U.S. authorities. The U.S. law enforcement agencies were the ones that were supposed to disarm violent people, not to permit terrorist plots in that territory, but they didn't.
It's not something that our government should have ever, turned a blind eye to.
Cuba had this information about bombs, wanted to be placed even in U.S. planes. They decided to call for a secret meeting with the FBI. In July 1998, some FBI officers were secretly sent to Havana and had a meeting with the Cuba Secretary of State. And Cuba presented a lot of information to the FBI about those terrorist organizations, who they are, hoping that they finally would act against those people.
They did nothing. That was in the summer of 1998.
I was traveling, I was tired, and I rented this hotel. It was very cheap. I went to my room, I put the computer in one place. I came back to my car, and when I came back, I didn't see my computer. Somebody stole my computer. I was afraid, it was the FBI. So I sent that information to Cuba, and Cuba sent me back the instruction to go to Miami, close down all my apartment, and go to Cuba. I came back to Miami. On September 11, I was in the process of closing down my apartment. The following day, I was leaving the United States.
It was all full of happiness.
Y René, sobre todo, dijo, bueno, de esta sí no me voy a perder nada, porque Dimita se había perdido buena parte de su infancia.
Olguita was working. She finished at 11 o'clock. I used to give milk with Yvette on my thighs. That night, when I finished up giving her the milk, she fell asleep. I thought it was beautiful to have her sleep over me, so I put it on top of me.
Cuando yo llego, que lo veo, digo, ay, nene, qué linda está así toda arriba de ti. Voy a tirar una foto. Nosotros tenemos una camarita.
And she took the picture.
Dejo la camarita arriba de la cómoda y bueno, nos acostamos a dormir, acostamos la niña y nos acostamos.
The time now 6:04.
Reporting live from downtown Miami. I got a beautiful sunrise just around the corner here.
One of those days you just want to curl up with a good book.
Echo team to command. Echo team at location. We have eyes on target.
Siento mucha bulla, va, gente dando gritos.
They threw me on the floor.
Ya le tenían puestas las esposas y lo estaban ayudando a incorporar.
It was really brutal.
Cuando me ven a mí, me agarran por una mano y me lanzan contra la pared. No dieron tiempo a más nada, se lo llevaron. Nos dijimos adiós así, con la mano y se lo llevaron.
There was a series of raids the United States government conducted against the Cuban agents.
Suddenly it was a boom.
They busted the door.
They say, hey, freeze, FBI.
And they were already on top of me.
And a lot of guns, pointing on me.
They arrest me, they put me in the handcuff.
Guerrero lived here in this quiet neighborhood on Big Pine Key. It was here where the FBI took him down.
They took me to the FBI office.
In the FBI headquarters, I saw Gerardo, I saw René.
And they started to interrogate me.
They played good cop, bad cop strategy. Some people come and say, you just cooperate with us. Your best chance now is to switch sides.
Basically, they wanted me to accept that I was a Cuban agent, that I was infiltrating the U.S.
And then the other cop comes and you're gonna rot it in the U.S. prison.
They opened up my wallet, they took my driver's license, and said, are you Ruben Camba? Yes, I am.
And I told her, well, my name is Luis Medina. I was born in Houston, Texas. I was raised in Puerto Rico.
He said, too many dead ends. That story is not true. I said, well, that's a story.
We cannot even arrange for you to go free now. You can have another identity.
We putting you in a big house, we bringing your song.
I believe that if you start thinking of that, maybe you can fall. I don't know. I didn't try.
I just giving you the opportunity to tell me the truth to see if you really want to collaborate with us. And I said, well, okay, I'm gonna give you the truth. So, well, my name is Luis Medina. I was born in Houston, Texas, and grew up in Puerto Rico. And then man started to feel like.
And they got very upset when we didn't do it.
Then the interview ended right there.
So he put me in a car and took me to the Federal Detention Center. When we're getting into the Federal Detention Center, there is a sliding door. They know that's a very vulnerable moment for an individual because, I mean, you know when you're going in there, but you don't know when you're going out. So when the door is open, he tells me, you know you're Cuban, and Fidel Castro is not gonna move a finger for you. So you're losing the opportunity to live in the land of the free. And I told him, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I'm sorry about the language, but that's what I said. I don't know what you're talking about. So that was it.
We have invited you here today to announce the arrest of 10 individuals in the South Florida area. These charges against these individuals allege actions for the Republic of Cuba against the government of the United States.
It was the front page, the lead story. Castro is infiltrating the United States. He's sending spies to Miami.
You know, my initial reaction upon reading it was, oh God, these guys are screwed.
These charges include conspiracy, espionage, operating illegally in the United States as a foreign agent.
It's a disturbing case to know that we and our institutions are being spied upon, are being reported upon, and the information being transmitted back to the Director of Intelligence over in Cuba.
You say you're guilty, that's it. You collaborate with the government and that's it. It's different. You get less time or you can go free or whatever. If you say no guilty because you're going to trial.
Since we refused to cooperate, we were placed in what prisoners call the hole or shoes, special housing units.
Oh, it's very difficult. If you don't have a strong mind, you get lost.
The trial took place in Miami against the objections of the defense lawyers who wanted to move the trial outside of the Miami area.
This was the wrong place to try the case.
We had a virulent exile community who wanted to just put all of these guys away for the rest of their life. Forget the allegations, forget the fact that they're presumed innocent.
We always suppose that Castro will have agents in the groups here trying to neutralize our activities.
Luis, how are you, sir? Good. I can't, I'm no comment. I can't comment on the case. Thank you.
Cuban spies connotes you're spying. They were never charged with spying. There's no such crime as being a spy. It doesn't exist. Failure to register as a foreign agent. In other words, this country requires all foreign agents, be they spies or friendly, to register. That's not being a spy.
There was no question they were unregistered foreign agents. We didn't really care too much about that because that only carried a maximum of 5 years.
Conspiracy to commit espionage. It is a rare charge. They were charged with not stealing military secrets. Not actually doing so, but agreeing to do so. That's not being a spy. Conspiracy to commit murder has nothing to do with spying. They were never charged with being spies. It's no such crime.
The main count, which was the essence of this case, was conspiracy to commit murder because of the shootdown.
The shootdown, February 1996. Clear and compelling evidence that a foreign government had conspired to murder one or more of our own.
The only one that was ever charged with anything to do with the shootdown was Gerardo.
There was not a plan to shoot down the place.
Government's evidence was Gerardo's reports, and they used these reports to show that Gerardo had ordered René not to fly with the brothers to the rescue.
The government argued that that had to make Gerardo 100% aware that they were going to shoot the planes down. My argument to that was, where does it say that?
Conspiracy is basically just an agreement to commit an illegal act.
Nobody knew what exactly they were going to do. There was nothing written that they were going to shoot these planes down. There was no, smoking gun against my client.
It was an extremely circumstantial case.
This happened because people were reckless and people did things that were illegal, and the U.S. government turned a blind eye to it.
The trial really took a change when they started to call some of the brothers to the rescue members.
Lawyer McKenna detailed Basulto's exploits as a CIA operative. The jury and defense listened as the defense labeled Basulto as a CIA-trained saboteur.
I needed to show the jury who this guy really was and what he had been up to.
Today in federal court, things got very heated between Jose Basulto and defense attorney Paul McKenna.
They grilled me as if I was the spy, as if I was the one provoking that whole thing.
You know, after like 2 hours of questioning, he said to me,
"Sir, are you doing the work of the intelligence service of Cuba?"
"Stop the trial, take the jury out."
Defense lawyers stunned, the judge reprimanding Basulto.
They were serving the enemy.
Another defense attorney accused Basulto of red baiting, saying if the jury found the accused not guilty, they'd be accused of being communist.
That's good enough to declare a mistrial, but the judge just didn't do it.
The circus without the elephants. That's exactly what it was.
There it was, that was part of the trial. We just kept going. The rest of them were just agents of a government.
We had put forward a defense of necessity.
You gather intelligence so that there won't be a 9/11, so there won't be a terrorist attack. That's what the Cubans were doing.
When do we try foreign spies? We send them back.
Do you know how many agents we have all over the world gathering information for us? Like Castro once said, in industrial quantities.
We wanted to say and to leave there for everybody to see the history of terrorism against Cuba.
Under normal circumstances, reasonable doubt protects Americans and non-Americans alike in a U.S. courtroom from a conviction.
We thought that some of the jury members would understand some of what we were presenting.
That jury sat through months and months of evidence.
We had won the trial overwhelmingly.
Lawyers thought that we have won the trial. Attorneys, translators thought that we have won the trial. Even the marshals thought that we have won the trial.
This afternoon, the jury returned guilty verdicts as to all counts, as to all defendants.
The jury found them guilty of all 26 counts, including conspiracy to commit espionage, conspiracy to commit murder.
I think the jury got it wrong.
This shut down an entire cell that had tentacles throughout South Florida. And so it was, without doubt in my mind, a successful prosecution.
We knew that to be acquitted in a courtroom in Miami would be almost impossible.
I hope sincerely that today's verdict provides some sense of justice.
It's probably the only case in the U.S. history where somebody is found guilty of conspiracy to commit espionage without one single piece of secret information anywhere.
I'm shaking my head, and René González looks at me and says, "Paul, what did you expect? This is Miami." And I was like, yeah, he's right. This is Miami.
We were found guilty of every single count, and we were given the maximum sentence.
Fernando and René González, they got 19 and 15 years.
Y yo no estaba triste, que más allá de la tristeza, yo lo que estaba era muy indignada.
To tell you the truth, I didn't care about the sentence. I knew what it was going to be.
I didn't do anything to harm anybody. I just was defending human beings.
Antonio Guerrero and Ramón Labañino got life in prison.
I never had in my heart that somebody can picture what I'm doing as bad thing.
In Miami, we knew from the very beginning we're going to lose the trial.
Gerardo Hernández received 2 life sentences to be served consecutively.
2 life sentences plus 15 years. So I have to die twice and still have 50 more years to go.
I mean, it was effectively a death sentence. And I thought that was appropriate.
Y que Gerardo regresara a Cuba horizontal, como decimos, en un féretro si devolvían un día su cadáver.
2002, they were finally moved to various federal prisons, and they were separated by hundreds and thousands of miles.
To die in prison is relatively easy. With so many people getting killed.
The life in prison is very tough, very, very tough.
So the first resolution I made, it was, if I had to die here, I would die happy. That's it.
From the very beginning, we knew that the government of Cuba would never abandon us, never.
Solo les digo una cosa, volverán.
Cuba would do as much as possible to take us back to Cuba.
He never seemed to lose his belief that everything would be okay. It's, I can't wait to see my wife again. And when I saw his wife, the same thing.
Lo sabíamos, nos lo dijo el comandante cuando lo hizo público, que dijo, no será una batalla de un día, será una batalla de años.
And I used to go away thinking, don't these people realize he's never going to get out? He's going to serve the rest of his life in a U.S. penitentiary.
As soon as the trial finished, we started already receiving mail from different parts of the world.
The plight of the Cuban Five was becoming more and more known internationally through the efforts of international Cuban solidarity groups, the efforts of the Cuban government. There was pressure put on the American government to either retry the five or release them outright.
How could we convince the Court of Appeals to undo this thing? And then, a miracle of miracles, we did.
The case was argued for the U.S. Court of Appeals in 2004. In 2005, they issued a 90-plus page opinion agreeing with the defense position, saying that the venue was improper, that the five could not have gotten a fair trial in Miami, and the events surrounding the trial formed a perfect storm.
And they overturned the convictions.
And everybody was very happy at that time.
I got to tell you, though, that when that Court of Appeals reversed the verdict, I had kind of a renewed faith in the entire federal system of laws. I was like, what an amazing country.
Y Gerardo me dice, bueno, mi reina, ¿estás contenta? ¿Estás feliz? Y le dije, sí, Gera, ahora sí ya ganamos, ahora sí es lo que queríamos. Me dice con mucha serenidad y me dice, ten cuidado. Dice, ¿ya ves la luz al final del túnel? Digo, sí, ahora sí se ve la luz al final del túnel. Dice, bueno, mi reina, ten mucho cuidado, no sea la luz del tren que está virando.
We were really excited, waiting for the new trial, and things started to get cold, you know, like nothing was happening.
When the en banc court reversed it, I kind of like all washed out of me. And I was back to, well, I guess, you know, it's not the way I thought it was.
Nosotros, eso fue el momento que para mí cerró todas las puertas legales.
René was released in October of 2011.
My sister ran and I ran after her and we just hugged him really, really, really hard.
One of the five is finally back in Cuba after 13 years in jail. His name is René González, and he is embraced by the Cuban people as a national hero.
And a second member of the Cuban Five spy ring was released today from a U.S. prison. 50-year-old Fernando González.
I saw my family, my wife, my mother, my sisters, and the families of my four brothers. They were also there.
It was a day of joy also for me to go there to the airport and receive him and give him a hug. And at the same time, both Fernando and myself, we had the same feeling of still being a little bit in prison.
Cuando regresó Fernando, faltaban los tres que tenían cadena perpetua.
I always hoped that the five of us would come together.
He never felt quite free.
On one side, you have to keep you hope. One day I'm gonna be in Cuba with my family, because that's the only way to keep your spirits up. But on the other side, you have to be realistic too. You might spend here the rest of your life, but then you said, I'm not here for stealing or killing anybody or for selling drugs. I'm here for a cause, for defending my people. So if I have to die here, that's the way it is.
Today, the United States of America is changing its relationship with the people of Cuba.
Earlier today, a prisoner swap between the United States and Cuba set off the most significant warming in relations between our two countries in over half a century.
Completely shocked. I couldn't believe it.
President Obama made his decision to release 3 Cuban spies convicted of espionage on American soil.
We were given the news that we were getting back to Cuba. Got into a plane and back to Cuba. The first one getting down was Antonio, and then Ramón, and I was the last one. It was a very emotional moment.
We felt that we were the happiest men on the world, at that time.
The three together, it's no word for that.
Hasta que no nos abrazamos, hasta que no nos vimos, y sentí la felicidad más grande que había sentido en toda mi vida.
Well, it was amazing.
Gerardo, who was in jail for 2 life sentences, came back to the announcement that his wife was giving birth to his first child.
Most of the people in Cuba didn't know, even most of her family, watching her on TV with big belly, everybody was, what? What is going on here?
Sí, ya ese fue el cierre.
We came back in December 17th, and then the baby was born in January 6th. Being able to father a child, that was probably the happiest moment in my life.
Very emotional moment. It's a moment the people of Cuba are expressing through that medal how they feel about you.
Are they heroes? No, the answer clearly is no from my perspective. I think they should still be in the United States serving their time.
We are not 5 individuals that are exceptional in Cuba. We know that millions of Cubans would have done the same thing that we did. My conscience is clear, it's clean. If I had to do it, I'd do it again.
I would do it again exactly the way I did it, but much, much better.
Any action that they ask me to do, I will do it. I will try to do it the best I can do it.
It takes a toll on you. It's not easy. But on the other side, it's your duty to do it.
If my country asked me to do that, I assume it's because it would be needed, and I would do it again.
You can take people that are true heroes, that have done something extraordinary to advance humankind. That's not who these 5 individuals were.
That meeting was first a celebration of a big victory, one of the last victories that Fidel claimed against the United States government.
Y esto es todo por hoy. Nos despedimos hasta la próxima semana con más Resumen Latinoamericano.
Banco Credicop, el banco cooperativo ideado para que los sueños de los argentinos se hagan realidad. hay otra idea de banco y funciona. Súmate. Banco Credicop Cooperativo. La banca solidaria.
Sindicato de Visitadores Médicos, Asociación Agentes de Propaganda Médica de la República Argentina.
Asociación de Trabajadores del Estado, Central de Trabajadores Argentinos.